17. Ekere Ibong. In December 2023, a lawyer named Ekere Ibong was caught on camera assaulting his wife in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. The upsetting video showed his wife dressed in only underwear with a bloodied, swollen face. The incident sparked widespread outrage after it went viral on multiple social media sites. After the public outcry, police officers in Akwa Ibom State quickly arrested Mr. Ibong at his home in Iwet Housing Estate. The police spokesperson, Odiko Macdon, revealed that Mr. Ibong had a long history of violently abusing his wife. And this latest assault was severe enough to warrant immediate intervention from the law. The Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, also took action by directing its Uyo branch to look into the incident. It was noted that this was not the first time Mr. Ibong had assaulted his wife in public, according to an anonymous source from within the local NBA branch. In the video, neighbors witnessing the assault were heard rebuking Mr. Ibong for his actions. Despite his wife's initial decision not to pursue legal action against her husband, lawyers pointed out that domestic violence is a crime against the state, not simply a personal matter. The NBA emphasized its commitment to getting justice for the woman, even if it went against her wishes. They said that they're doing so because these types of cases are not just about the victim, but also about upholding the law and protecting human rights as a whole. Although Mrs. Ibong later withdrew from the case, purportedly thanks to societal pressures and concerns about her family's welfare. Legal experts explained that her withdrawal would not necessarily stop the legal proceedings. Mr. Ibong's confessional statement, along with the irrefutable video evidence, could be sufficient enough to convict him, even without a testimony from his wife. The incident prompted a nationwide conversation about domestic violence and the importance of holding those responsible accountable, including the Akwa Ibom State Governor and the Minister of Women Affairs, pledged support for finding justice in this case. 16. Aaron Brockler. In February 2019, a Cleveland defense lawyer named Aaron Brockler faced a shocking assault when his client, David Chiselton, suddenly sucker-punched him in the face after receiving a 47-year prison sentence in Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. The incident happened thanks to what Brockler described as negligence by the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department regarding the way Chiselton was handcuffed during his sentencing hearing. Brockler testified that he was considering filing a lawsuit against the Sheriff's Department for letting Chiselton be handcuffed with his hands in front of his body, instead of behind him, which is standard procedure. This deviation in protocol provided Chiselton with enough mobility to freely strike Brockler during the court proceedings. The assault led to a trial where Chiselton faced an additional charge of felonious assault for the punch he delivered to Brockler. Lake County Common Pleas Court Judge Joseph Gibson presided over the case, since Cuyahoga County judges had dismissed themselves. Prosecutors used video evidence from a sheriff's deputy's body camera as a crucial part of their case. The footage, which attracted national attention, clearly showed Chiselton attacking Brockler in the courtroom. Brockler testified about the impact of the assault, indicating that he briefly lost consciousness and received 2 hairline fractures in his nose. This claim was later confirmed by medical records from Metro Health. Jim Jenkins, Chiselton's defense lawyer, finished presenting his side of the case with the prosecutors on the first day of the trial. Witnesses, including defense attorney Michael Goldberg and Deputy Raymond Morin, highlighted the unusual circumstances surrounding Chiselton's handcuffing during the sentencing. Chiselton had a long history of violent behavior, including a 2017 incident where he instigated a police standoff after assaulting his girlfriend and setting his apartment complex on fire. Brockler, who used to work as a prosecutor, faced multiple questions during the trial because of a previous problem with the Ohio Supreme Court over how he handled some of his cases. Even with this past issue, Brockler worked out a deal with Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley's office. The deal allowed the judge to decide how long Chiselton would stay in prison. After the assault, Brockler pursued legal action by suing Chiselton and the sheriff's deputies responsible for securing the courtroom. The lawsuit accused the deputies, Jeffrey Turner Jr. and Raymond Morin, of engaging in reckless misconduct for failing to properly restrain Chiselton, ultimately enabling the assault. Brockler's legal action sought $600,000 in damages, but left the outcome uncertain pending additional legal proceedings. 15. Alexis Plunkett. In 2019, a well-known Las Vegas attorney named Alexis Plunkett was disbarred from practicing law in Nevada because of her involvement in allowing clients to use their cell phones in jail, which violated state regulations. This decision came after she pleaded guilty to one count of possession of a telecommunication device by a prisoner and received 3 years probation. Chief Justice Mark Gibbons of the Nevada Supreme Court stressed just how serious Alexis Plunkett's crime was, pointing out that it caused significant harm to the legal system and her clients. When talking with news outlets, Plunkett expressed that she felt regretful about what happened. She said being a lawyer was her lifelong goal and that she's always wanted to help people. Despite her plea to never practice law in Nevada again, the court's decision left her completely devastated. Plunkett's legal troubles stemmed from jail visits she made to a former client named Rogelio Estrada and her then-boyfriend Andrew Arevalo, who'd been injured by a prison guard back in 2014. Plunkett represented Arevalo in a lawsuit against the Nevada Department of Corrections related to the incident. During these few visits, she let them use a cell phone, believing at the time that they were authorized to make calls regarding bail inquiries. Although District Judge Michael Villani dismissed charges against Plunkett initially, the Nevada Supreme Court later decided to overturn this decision. Plunkett faced additional allegations of bribing or intimidating a witness and dissuading or preventing testimony, but those charges were eventually dropped as part of her plea agreement. Even though Plunkett apologized and admitted that she'd made a mistake, the court didn't agree to suspend her for 5 years like she'd hoped. Instead, they decided to disbar her to make sure everyone, the public, the courts, and other lawyers, would be safe from any future issues she might cause. Plunkett's case generated significant attention and discussion among her peers and friends. Some attributed her legal troubles to her confrontational stance against authority figures after the prison shooting incident. Despite her many challenges, Plunkett continued to express remorse for the impact her actions had on both her clients and her own life. 14. Beatrice Bijou. In February 2022, Beatrice Bijou, a 31-year-old personal injury lawyer from Fort Lauderdale, was placed under arrest after she drove her car straight into 4 people outside a grocery store. She claimed that she had heard voices whispering in her head, telling her to kill them. The incident took place at a parking lot where Bijou mounted the sidewalk and hit pedestrians at 35 miles per hour. 56 kilometers per hour without slowing down. Surveillance footage also showed her reversing at high speeds and trying to hit another pedestrian. Bijou was later charged with 4 counts of attempted murder and a few other offenses related to the incident. The Florida bar moved quickly to suspend the woman's license, and she was also disbarred by the state Supreme Court. In October 2022, after a medical evaluation, Bijou was found not guilty by reason of insanity for the deranged attack. During a court appearance, she seemed composed but was held without bond since her arrest. Bijou confessed to police that she acted on the voices she heard in her head, directly saying that they ordered her to kill the people. The judge's ruling meant that Bijou would be sent to a mental health institution for treatment thanks to her diagnosed schizophrenia and experience of auditory and visual hallucinations. Her lawyer, Lance Richard, mentioned that she was doing well with medication and was almost back to her usual self. Richard also said that his client had encouraging plans for her future. One of the victims of the attack, Holly Mineo, who was injured alongside her mother Liz, told local news outlets that they still experience ongoing trauma weeks after the incident. She said that her injuries impact daily activities and remain constantly on their minds. Liz, the mother, shared a touching message of acceptance and encouraged Beiu to accept help for her own well-being as well as her family's. The court's decision to adjudicate Beiu by reason of insanity marked a turning point in the case's legal proceedings, redirecting her from a criminal trial to psychiatric care. This outcome reflected the recognition of her mental health issues and the need for treatment, not punishment. 13. Brian J. Hallagan. In 2019, Ashland, Ohio lawyer Brian J. Hallagan faced a 2-year suspension from practicing law after multiple incidents involving alcohol-related misconduct. The Ohio Supreme Court unanimously agreed to the suspension, thanks to Hallagan's inappropriate conduct in representing a client while under the influence and subsequent alcohol-related offenses. The court found Hallagan in violation of professional conduct rules when he showed up intoxicated at a client's felony trial, and when he faced charges related to his own alcohol-related traffic violations. In November 2016, Hallagan was assigned to represent a client facing felony charges. But on the day of the trial, back in January 2017, court personnel noticed the smell of alcohol on him and that he was slurring his words. The judge quickly removed him from the case after he refused to take a breath alcohol test and was later arrested for driving under the influence. In March 2017, Hallagan made an appearance in court for a prior DUI charge smelling of alcohol yet again, even though his driving privileges had already been revoked. He was then arrested for driving under suspension, despite testing below the legal limit for blood alcohol concentration. Hallagan pleaded guilty to all of these offenses, resulting in jail time, fines, and probation. He also faced several complaints from clients regarding unresponsiveness due to the seizure of his phone when he was arrested. The Ohio Office of Disciplinary Counsel charged Hallagan with multiple rule violations, including dishonesty, as well as failing to promptly return unearned fees. The court agreed with these findings, resulting in Hallagan's license being suspended and terms being set for his reinstatement. These terms included completion of alcohol-related assessments and payment of restitution to his clients. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor and Justices Judith L. French and Michael P. Donnelly supported the court's decision. On the other hand, Justice Sharon L. Kennedy disagreed with the court's failure to establish specific probation conditions. She argued that this direct omission undermined the court's duty to ensure public safety and the rehabilitation of lawyers. Justice Patrick F. Fisher agreed with the court majority, defending the court's discretion in imposing probation conditions. This ruling reflects a balance between disciplinary action and potential rehabilitation for Hallagan, stressing the clear importance of professional conduct and public trust in law. 12. Sha O Donovan. In early 2024, a 56-year-old former Massachusetts attorney named Sha O Donovan was sentenced to spend 2 years in prison. After serving his time, he was ordered to have 3 years of supervised release. He also had to pay a fine of $150,000, as well as a $300 special assessment fee. O'Donovan was convicted back in October 2023 by a federal jury on 2 counts of honest services wire fraud and 1 count of bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds. He'd engaged in a scheme to bribe the chief of police in Medford, Massachusetts, to get approval for his client to sell recreational marijuana and not be penalized. The former attorney's goal was to corrupt the city of Medford's process for selecting retail marijuana companies by trying to influence the Medford police chief. The chief of police was appointed to a committee to rank these kinds of applications on behalf of the mayor. O'Donovan approached one of the chief's relatives and offered to pay them $50,000 in tax-free cash. In exchange, he wanted the chief's official support. Specifically, O'Donovan wanted the chief to rank his client's application favorably and advise the mayor to select his client. If his client's Medford application was a success, O'Donovan was set to receive at least $100,000 annually from the marijuana trade. But after the relative informed the chief of O'Donovan's corrupt offer, the chief immediately informed federal authorities. Both the chief and his relative worked closely with the investigation. Acting United States Attorney Joshua S. Levy said that O'Donovan's actions were entirely driven by greed. Levy said that the sentence serves as a warning to those who think they can corrupt government officials for their own personal gain. Jody Cohen, special agent in charge of the FBI's Boston division, emphasized that blatant corruption is toxic to the public trust, and the FBI is committed to stamping every last bit of it out. 11. Judith Soley. Towards the start of 2011, the Fresno County legal community was shaken to its core by the tragic shooting and passing of 65-year-old prominent divorce attorney Judith Soley and her client Sandra Williamson. The incident took place on February 6th at Ducey's restaurant in Bass Lake during a short break in the Williamsons' divorce proceedings. According to several reports, Sandra's estranged husband, James Williamson, started beating Soley in her van before taking out a firearm and shooting her. He then chased Sandra into the restaurant's kitchen and fatally shot her before running from the scene. Later, authorities found James Williamson's body. He was killed by a self-inflicted gunshot wound inside his home. Judith Soley was a trailblazer in the legal profession. She was the first female president of the Fresno County Bar Association. She was also one of the earliest female lawyers to be certified as a family law specialist by the state bar. She was widely respected for her advocacy efforts and unwavering commitment to the well-being of her clients. Kimberly Nystrom Geist, the family law presiding judge and Soley's former law partner, described her simply as amazing. She said that Soley was a successful single mother who built a thriving practice while juggling being a mom. Later on, her daughter eventually became her law partner after following in her mother's footsteps. Beyond her legal work, Soley was actively involved in several community organizations, including the Rotary Club and California Women Lawyers. The tragedy of her passing left the legal community in shock, though colleagues acknowledged the potential for danger to accompany highly emotional divorce and child custody cases. Melissa White, the immediate past president of the Fresno County Bar Association, noted that while Soley's death was unusual, some lawyers have obtained concealed weapon permits in the past due to the many risks in family law. At Soley's memorial service, which was attended by hundreds of mourners, friends, and colleagues, her life and accomplishments were celebrated. Those who knew her described her as a loving mother, world traveler, and an inspiration who lived life without barriers despite using a wheelchair. 10. Eva Vos. In early 2024, Eva Vos, the 54-year-old state attorney for Addison County in Vermont, found herself caught up in legal trouble. On January 12th, Vermont State Police placed Vos under arrest after she allegedly arrived at a crime scene in Bridport while under the influence of alcohol. Troopers reported that Vos smelled strongly of intoxicants and even had slurred speech when she showed up to the suspicious death investigation. Vos refused to take field sobriety tests and was quickly arrested for DUI refusal, a charge that can lead to a 6-month license suspension. She was then processed at the New Haven Barracks, but refused to get fingerprinted or photographed. Despite the pending DUI case, Vos went back to work in early March 2024 after a brief medical leave. On her first day back, she cut a plea deal with a defendant named Holly Gagno, who was charged with a second DUI after crashing her vehicle with a juvenile inside in late 2022. In the deal, Gagno's charge was taken down to a first offense DUI, even though she had a prior DUI conviction from 2015 which was related to a fatal crash. The woman received a suspended sentence and probation, but no jail time. Vos claimed that Gagno sought treatment and stayed sober for 14 months, justifying the lighter sentence as Gagno stayed on this productive, positive path. It also eventually came to light that Vos sent a sarcastic email to local law enforcement during her leave. The message said that she didn't feel safe around law enforcement and mocked their poor grammar skills. But later on, she sent an apology for the insulting email. Vos had made headlines a few months earlier for the unusual decision to charge a 14-year-old as an adult for the fatal shooting of another teen. Her DUI case remains ongoing after an unsuccessful attempt to get it dismissed during February 2024. Despite the controversy, Vermont officials stated that the Addison County State's Attorney's Office would continue operating with Vos on their payroll. 9. Chad Green. In April 2024, a shocking incident took place in Little Rock, Arkansas, involving a well-known defense attorney, 47-year-old Chad Green. According to a police report, Green was identified as the suspect who tried to rob a Bank of America branch on Geyer Springs Road. The incident unfolded somewhere around 7:50 a.m. when officers received reports of a shooting happening at the bank. Upon arrival, they quickly learned that Green had allegedly maced a Loomis armored truck driver, who was servicing an ATM at the time. In response, the driver shot Green, who then escaped the scene on a bicycle. After the attempted robbery, Green made a phone call to dispatchers while on Interstate 430 near Rodney Parham Road. Both Arkansas State Police troopers and Little Rock police officers responded to the site of the call. Green was then taken to a local hospital for treatment, but his current condition is still undisclosed. The details surrounding the attempted robbery and Green's motivations are all unclear. This incident sent ripples through the local community, since Green was a prominent figure in the local legal scene. Law enforcement authorities are now conducting a thorough investigation in order to determine the circumstances that led up to this bizarre attempted robbery and the subsequent attack involving the armored truck driver. 8. Doug Lewis. On the morning of December 7, 2022, a horrific scene unfolded at the Lawrenceville law offices of Doug Lewis, a respected divorce attorney in Georgia. According to several police reports, Alan Taya, who was in the middle of a heated divorce case with his estranged wife and was being represented by Lewis, allegedly went to the lawyer's office with malicious intent. A few witnesses reported seeing Taya go inside the building at 10 a.m. And just a few moments later, multiple gunshots rang out through the air. Police received frantic 911 calls about an active shooter situation happening at the law office. When officers reached the scene, they found that 54-year-old Doug Lewis had been shot multiple times at close range. He was immediately pronounced dead at the scene. But the violence didn't stop there. Investigators say that Taya then proceeded to douse the interior of the law office with gasoline from some fuel cans he brought with him. He then allegedly set the building ablaze before escaping on foot. Firefighters rushed to put out the large fire as thick plumes of black smoke poured into the sky. A witness who'd been outside the offices during the fire spotted Taya nearby and alerted law enforcement. Officers quickly apprehended Taya, who suffered burns himself and was still carrying the revolver he used to kill Lewis. Used shell casings were discovered in the cylinder of the firearm. The area reeked of gasoline, and police found additional fuel cans near Taya, seemingly to confirm the accounts of him setting the office on fire. Taya was then arrested and booked on charges of malicious murder and arson. Authorities said that he was due to make an appearance at a court hearing with his estranged wife in the next few days regarding their divorce proceedings. The motive seemed to be rage over the pending divorce case. News of the brutal murder and arson rocked the close-knit Lawrenceville legal community. Lewis, who left behind a wife and multiple children, was remembered fondly as a professional, a caring family man, and a role model. Former colleagues were stunned that the kind, even-tempered attorney met such a violent end at the hands of an enraged, soon-to-be ex-spouse. The tragedy also cast a grim spotlight on the potential dangers divorce attorneys can face when dealing with highly charged, intense situations. It served as a devastating reminder on how quickly emotions can devolve into violence when divorces turn bitter. Increased security measures were called for in the wake of Lewis's death. 7. Pablo Martinez Jr. In late 2023, Pablo Martinez Jr., a 31-year-old attorney and former assistant district attorney in Waco, Texas, faced some serious charges. Martinez allegedly tried to run over a group of Baylor University students who were in a drunken state outside a party. The incident happened at about 11:30 p.m. on October 19th. The situation unfolded when Martinez, who was driving a Toyota pickup truck, reportedly hit a mailbox at a home where a party was taking place. When asked to leave the property, Martinez went back to his truck. But concerned about his behavior, students followed him to write down his license plate number. As students approached the vehicle, Martinez suddenly stepped on the gas. He drove recklessly across 4 different lawns towards the students, who had to run and jump out of the way to avoid being hit. According to police, about 20 to 30 students saw this frightening incident unfold and feared serious harm. Police later tracked Martinez down to a different location after he was seen striking a street barrier. He was eventually found in a La Quinta Inn motel parking lot with a flat tire and a heavily damaged truck. Martinez displayed signs of heavy intoxication, with officers noting a strong smell of alcohol coming from his breath. Additionally, a search of his vehicle uncovered 3 different handguns. Martinez was arrested and now faces multiple charges, including driving while intoxicated, unlawful carrying of a weapon, striking fixtures on a highway landscape, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He remains in custody at McLennan County Jail with a bond amount of $69,000. Martinez was previously employed as a prosecutor in the McLennan County District Attorney's Office. For now, the case appears to be ongoing. 6. Anthony Pastor. In August 2016, a corporate lawyer from Manhattan named Anthony Pastor was sentenced to serve 2 years in prison for brutally beating his girlfriend's poodle, Snoopy, to death. Pastor's defense attorney argued that his client's troubled upbringing, where he was supposedly mistreated for being the only Jewish kid at his boarding school, should be cause enough to be considered for leniency. But the judge, Robert Mandelbaum, was unmoved by the defense's argument and handed down the maximum sentence possible. During the trial, evidence showed that Pastor repeatedly attacked Snoopy, causing 9 broken ribs, a pulverized kidney, and internal bleeding that ultimately led to the poor dog's death. Snoopy suffered extreme pain before finally losing consciousness, while Pastor callously continued with his daily routine as if nothing had happened. The judge condemned Pastor's actions, saying that they displayed incomprehensible violence and unheard-of levels of malice. He criticized Pastor for damaging not only Snoopy's life, but also his own son's life irreparably. Pastor's former fiancée also testified that her dog had died under similar circumstances, although Pastor was not charged for that case. Haley Russell, Snoopy's owner, hoped that her beloved dog's death would make people more aware of animal abuse and stop it from ever happening again. Despite receiving multiple death threats while in jail, Pastor was ordered into protective custody and was required to register on the Animal Abuse Registry. The judge's decision highlighted the severity of the crime and the need for Pastor to take accountability for his actions. 5. Philip Simonelli. In late 2023, a 29-year-old city lawyer named Philip Simonelli was placed under arrest after a drunk driving incident in Brooklyn. According to multiple prosecutors, Simonelli was driving a Toyota Camry when he suddenly crashed into a marked NYPD patrol car in Gowanus at about 2:20 a.m. After the collision, he allegedly ignored several red lights and even drove straight onto a sidewalk. When the police officers from the patrol car approached Simonelli, they noticed a few signs that he was heavily intoxicated, including watery eyes, the smell of alcohol in his breath, and unsteady hand movements. Despite being asked to take a breath test, Simonelli reportedly refused to comply. Currently, he faces charges related to driving under the influence, DUI, but additional charges could be added as the investigation progresses further. Simonelli started working for the city as a student legal specialist while studying at City University of New York School of Law back in 2018. He was hired by the law department as a full-time employee during 2020, earning an annual salary of $75,277, according to the city's records. The law department is now reviewing the circumstances surrounding the incident, as reported by one of their spokesmen. Following his arrest, Simonelli was arraigned in Brooklyn and was released without paying bail. He has not yet responded to requests for comment on the situation. 4. Thomas Mvin ap Rees Price. Thomas Mvin ap Rees Price was a promising 31-year-old British lawyer known for his dedication to his work and commitment to keeping social justice alive. Tragically, his life was cut short on January 12, 2006 in Kensal Green, northwest London, when he unfortunately fell victim to a senseless act of violence. That night, Price was on his way home from work, probably unaware of the criminal activities that had unfolded earlier in the day, when his path intersected with two young men, Donald Carty and Delano Brown. These individuals, a pair of childhood friends with a history of involvement in gang activities, had already committed a robbery at Kensal Green railway station before meeting Price. Eyewitnesses described seeing Price running in distress as Carty and Brown chased him along Bathurst Gardens. The situation then escalated quickly, with Carty delivering multiple stabbing blows to Price, fatally injuring him. Despite Price's many pleas and attempts to defend himself, the attackers callously robbed him of his phone and Oyster card. Carty and Brown then left the scene, leaving Price to deal with his injuries alone on the pavement. After the murder, a comprehensive police investigation, including the analysis of CCTV footage as well as forensic evidence, led to the apprehension and trial of Carty and Brown. Both were convicted of Price's murder, and they were each sentenced to spend life in prison. Carty received a minimum term of 21 years, and Brown was given a minimum of 20 years behind bars. Price's untimely death prompted significant public outcry and sparked countless discussions about the safety and security of railway stations, particularly those left unstaffed during late-night hours. The crime shed light on vulnerabilities within the transportation system, with calls for improved security measures like increased staff presence and controlled access points. In response to the tragedy, the Tom ap Rees Price Memorial Trust was established to honor Price's memory. The funds support educational opportunities for disadvantaged children. Additionally, Price's legacy extended overseas with the construction of a primary school in Vietnam, funded by Price's former employer, Linklaters. This school serves as a lasting tribute to Price's passion for education and his desire to make a positive impact on the world. The case of Tom ap Rees Price remains a poignant reminder of the devastating impact of senseless violence and the importance of prioritizing public safety initiatives to stop similar tragedies from happening. Price's memory continues to inspire efforts aimed at fostering positive change and empowering vulnerable communities, leaving an enduring legacy of hope and resilience in the face of constant adversity. 3. Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh, a former South Carolina personal injury lawyer, faced legal trouble after being convicted in 2023 of killing his wife and son. He received a life sentence for these crimes. But now, a federal grand jury has indicted Murdaugh on 22 additional charges related to financial crimes, including fraud and money laundering. The indictment, announced by the United States Attorney's Office in South Carolina, claims that Murdaugh engaged in various schemes over several years to defraud his personal injury clients. In one scheme spanning over a decade, from 2005 to 2021, Murdaugh is accused of diverting settlement funds intended for clients to himself by using improper forms. He's also accused of falsely claiming fees and intercepting insurance payouts that were originally meant for beneficiaries. He allegedly directed the money to his personal accounts and used it for loans and other expenses. Another plot involved a decade-long conspiracy with his trusted banker, Russell Lafitte, to commit wire and bank fraud. Lafitte, who was convicted back in 2022, acted as Murdaugh's representative for client settlements. MDof told employees to issue checks to a bank where Lafitte worked. The funds were then used for MDof's benefit, including personal expenses and even cash withdrawals. In a third scheme, MDof allegedly set up a bogus corporation that he called Forge to handle insurance settlements. He funneled stolen settlement money through this account from 2017 up until 2021. The indictment also describes how MDof worked with another attorney to deceive his late housekeeper's estate. After the housekeeper's death in 2018, MDof advised the estate to engage the other attorney in order to pursue a claim against him. The settlement funds, totaling almost $3.5 million, were allegedly diverted to MDof's Forge account. The housekeeper's estate received none of the cash. MDof's lawyers seemed fairly confident that the charges would be resolved without a trial, stating that he'd been cooperating with federal authorities in their investigation. But the charges carried significant financial penalties and even potential jail time. In the end, MDof was sentenced to serve an additional 40 years in prison on top of his life sentence. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering. The decision was handed down by Judge Richard M. Gergel in 2024. Additionally, MDof was ordered to pay nearly $9 million in restitution fees to his victims. The court also imposed a $10 million forfeiture order for his ill-gotten gains. 2. Willie Davis. In January 2024, Massachusetts top court ruled that Nyasani Watt, who was convicted of first-degree murder back in 2013, deserves a retrial since his defense lawyer, Willie Davis, repeatedly fell asleep during the original trial. Chief Justice Kimberly Budd said that Watt was denied his constitutional right to counsel thanks to Davis's conduct. During Watt's 2013 murder trial, where he was accused of killing 16-year-old Jyvonne Blake and wounding 14-year-old Kimoni Elliott in 2011, Davis's frequent sleeping raised concerns about the fairness of the proceedings. These episodes cast doubt on the effectiveness of Watts' representation. The court highlighted that multiple witnesses, including 2 prosecutors involved in the case, corroborated Watt's claim that his lawyer was asleep during key parts of the trial. Watt, who was just 17 at the time of the shooting, had been sentenced to serve life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court's decision not only granted Watt a new trial, but also overturned his previous conviction and sent the case back to the lower court. Willie Davis, the defense attorney, passed away in June 2019 at 83 years old. According to Watts' current lawyer, Elizabeth Doherty, Davis had extensive experience, having litigated almost 100 first-degree murder cases during his career. Elizabeth Doherty expressed satisfaction with the court's ruling, stressing the importance of attorneys remaining awake and engaged during trial proceedings. The Suffolk County District Attorney's Office spokesperson confirmed that they are now reviewing the court's decision regarding Watts' retrial, signaling ongoing legal developments. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Christopher Reynolds. Christopher Reynolds, a Pinellas County lawyer, was arrested back in February 2023 for allegedly stealing over $840,000 from clients to support his illicit drug habits. Sheriff Bob Gualtieri announced Reynolds' arrest. He explained that Reynolds started his personal injury law practice in 2015, specializing mainly as a car wreck lawyer. Authorities revealed that Reynolds was entrusted to refer his clients, mostly victims of car accidents, to medical providers using a letter of protection. Afterwards, he was the one responsible for billing the charges to the insurance companies of the supported at-fault drivers. The man's arrest came after a complaint in early October 2022 from a car accident victim represented by Reynolds. The victim reported having regular communication with Reynolds until the case's conclusion, after which Reynolds stopped communicating completely. After contacting her insurance company, the victim discovered that Reynolds had settled the case for $100,000 in March 2022 without ever compensating her for her injuries. Sheriff Gualtieri disclosed that Reynolds forged the victim's signature on multiple settlement documents without settling her medical expenses or transferring her settlement money. Subsequent investigations revealed that the Florida bar was already probing into the systematic theft by Reynolds. Gualtieri stated that the lawyer misappropriated over $840,000 from 16 separate individuals, although he mentioned that there could be even more victims that haven't been identified. In December 2022, the Florida Supreme Court issued an emergency suspension of Reynolds' license to practice law in the state. And further investigation showed that Reynolds utilized some of the funds to sustain his addiction to drugs. His bank records also showed significant expenditures on platforms like OnlyFans, Bill, PayPal, and Uber. Reynolds was finally arrested in February on numerous counts of grand theft and money laundering. Gualtieri condemned the situation, describing it as a case where someone entrusted to help others instead took advantage of them and stole their money, which he deemed deplorable. The outcome of the case is unclear, so it's more than likely ongoing.
Number 9. Rachel Hoffman. During a routine traffic stop in Tallahassee, Florida in 2007, a new college graduate named Rachel Hoffman was caught with over 5 ounces, 142 grams of cannabis, and a handful of ecstasy pills. To avoid prison, she agreed to work off the charges by acting as a police informant against others in the drug scene. As part of the operation, Hoffman was tasked with trying to buy a large amount of ecstasy and cocaine and 2 handguns with $13,000 cash. It was an out-of-character buy for the young woman, but the authorities asked her to do it anyway. Hoffman went to the cellar with 2 undercover police officers that were tasked with acting as her security. The suspects changed the location last minute, and the undercovers tried warning her not to follow them, but she didn't get their message thanks to technical difficulties. So she went with the suspects in a stolen car, and her handlers lost track of her. Just a few minutes later, one of the suspects shot her execution style with one of the guns she was trying to buy. The suspects, Daniello R. Bradshaw and Andrea Jabbar Green, were soon convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. But the Tallahassee Police Department also came under fire for their botched sting operation. Many blamed them for the avoidable loss of life, just as much as the killers themselves. Consequently, new legislation called Rachel's Law now requires law enforcement agencies in Florida to provide special training to officers working with confidential informants. Number 8. Christopher Dean. In October 2016, members of Atlanta's gangster Disciple Street Gang found out that 33-year-old Christopher Dean acted as a police informant in his past. Feeling betrayed and threatened, 5 gang members lured him to a home in Atlanta for what he thought was going to be a drug sale. When he got there, they tortured him for at least an hour, beating him severely with a crowbar and a 2x4 to show that being a snitch wasn't tolerated. The gang then shot Dean twice in the back of the head, before calling over 2 other members who were supposed to clean up the crime scene and dispose of the victim's body. After witnessing the horrifying condition of Dean's remains, the pair stuffed him into the trunk of a car and left it parked outside a local gas station, instead of getting rid of it the way they were supposed to. Police discovered Dean's body in the trunk and ultimately linked all 7 suspects to the murder. At least 5 of the gang members were convicted of the killing and sentenced to life in prison without parole, including Christopher Lockett, Xavier Gibson, Cortez Clark, Joshua Rooks, and Jasper Green. Number 7. Heidi Allen. 18-year-old Heidi Allen was working as a convenience store clerk in New Haven, New York, when she suddenly vanished without a trace on Easter morning in 1994. Authorities believe Heidi was kidnapped and that she's most likely dead, but her body was never recovered and her fate has stayed a mystery. To this day, the Oswego County Sheriff's Department and the FBI consider her a missing person. Among the many questions surrounding Heidi's disappearance is whether she was a confidential informant when she went missing. Despite unknown details, prosecutors concluded that a man named Gary Thibodeau, the last person to see Heidi alive, was responsible for whatever happened to her. He was convicted of the alleged crime in 1995 and yet the case has remained under investigation ever since. Law enforcement claim the case is open because they want to find Heidi's body, not because they have any doubt on who's responsible. But Thibodeau maintained his innocence until his death in 2018. In 2015, his lawyer speculated that Heidi's disappearance had something to do with her being a drug informant. They even claimed that the sheriff's refusal to hand over documents on Heidi's status affected their ability to properly defend Thibodeau. Sadly, many details about the case remain shrouded in mystery, including things authorities could reveal if they were willing to do so. Whether Heidi was a drug informant and whether or not it contributed to her disappearance is still unclear. Number 6. Informant number 913. Guillermo Eduardo Ramirez Pero, or Informant number 913, was a Mexican drug informant for American authorities back in the year 2000. Law enforcement immediately noticed that Guillermo, or Lalo, was different from their typical informant. Lalo was well-dressed, respectful, and eagerly gave up information without hesitation, and he wasn't looking to cut a deal either, since he wasn't in legal trouble. Former U.S. Immigration and Customs agent Raul Bencomo later told National Public Radio that the intel the informant provided came from the higher ranks of the cartel that he worked for. The information was so reliable that he helped authorities take down a corrupt customs agent and an international cigarette smuggling ring. In fact, according to Bencomo, the feds couldn't keep up with the amount of reports Lalo submitted. Authorities learned the hard way that Guillermo was just as much a participant in illegal activity as he was an informant. Until then, they didn't realize that he was playing both sides of the coin, and they would soon realize that drug smuggling was on the milder end of Lalo's illegal activities. Lalo accompanied his boss, a high-ranking drug kingpin, and several others on an 8-month brutal kidnapping, torture, and killing spree. His superiors on the legal side of things kept him on their payroll even though his participation in crimes was unacceptable under official protocol. Former DEA Special Agent Phil Jordan accused several ICE agents of giving Lalo a license to kill and for failing to share their intel with Mexican authorities, which they should have done in the first place. He said that every rule and regulation revolving around informants was broken with Lalo. For 6 years after the murders, ICE officials refused to speak on the case at all. At least a dozen bodies were found at the location where Lalo's worst crimes were committed, nicknamed the House of Death. U.S. authorities insisted it was an isolated incident, but Mexican officials had a hard time looking past the ordeal and the broken trust that came with it. Number 5. Andrew Sedek. While going to college in North Dakota in 2013, Andrew Sedek was arrested on felony charges for selling marijuana. He faced years in prison, so he agreed to be a confidential informant for the Southeast Multi-County Agency Narcotics Task Force, or SEMCA, in exchange for getting his charges dropped. Sedek's work as an informant started with several controlled buys from dealers around campus, but he disappeared suddenly one day in 2014, and nobody knew what happened to him until 2 months later, when his body was found in Minnesota's Red River with a gunshot wound in the head. Police concluded that Sedek must have taken his own life to escape his obligations as an informant, but the young man's family believes he was likely murdered. He didn't leave behind a goodbye or suicide note, and his backpack was filled with rocks, which seemed to his loved ones like he was met with foul play. State authorities investigated Sedek's suspicious death at his mother's request, but ruled that there was nothing strange about it. But the family was successful in their campaign to pass Andrew's Law, which ended mandatory drug sentencing and increased the amount of drugs a suspect had to be caught with in order to be charged under law with dealing. They also introduced new provisions meant to protect confidential informants. Number 4. Susan Cooper. After being arrested on federal drug charges in 2016, Susan Cooper from Arkansas agreed to become an informant to reduce her legal consequences. She provided investigators with information that led them to a meth dealer named Samuel Sherman, who also agreed to cooperate with police. But the information he gave wasn't enough to help his case, and he still faced a significant amount of time behind bars. Angry about the mess he was caught up in and at the person he thought got him into it, Sherman called a friend, Donald Bill Smith, who was also a meth dealer and had a history of selling drugs to Susan's sister-in-law, Rachel Cooper. Sherman, Smith, and Rachel Cooper worked together to make a deal with Susan, who thought she was going to trade some hydrocodone pills for meth. Rachel picked Susan up and drove her to the drug deal site. When they got there, Smith came out and shot Susan multiple times. He pulled her out of the car as Rachel panicked and sped off, seemingly unaware that the plan all along had been to murder the girl. Her body remained missing until 18 months later, when another informant told detectives that Smith had forced them to help bury Susan in a secluded pasture. Smith and Sherman were convicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy to cause witness tampering resulting in death. They were each given life in federal prison. Number 3. Valentine Broki. 46-year-old Valentine Broki was a musician by day and an informant by night. And he wasn't an ordinary snitch either. He had some seriously high-ranking intel, earning him favor among the United States top intelligence authorities. In early 2021, he turned over a stash of secret documents about Deutsche Bank to the FBI. The files were reportedly about the financial institution's money laundering ties with Russia and the activities of former US President Donald Trump. Broki reportedly accessed the info using email passwords belonging to his late stepfather, a former Deutsche Bank executive who committed suicide in 2014. The elder Broki left behind a note detailing how he had failed to cover up fraud on the bank's behalf. New York Times business investigations editor David Enrich later described the younger Broki as a routine drug abuser who desperately wanted to be the center of attention and feel like he mattered, which was perhaps what motivated him to become an informant in the first place. In 2020, not long after he submitted the damning documents, Broki's car was found abandoned in Los Angeles. Based on its contents, it seemed as if he was homeless, but Broki himself was nowhere to be found. The man's body was discovered dead a year later inside a local high school. Authorities said there were no signs of foul play, but they offered few details regarding the mysterious circumstances of his death, leaving the rest of the world wondering whether the troubled musician's activities as an informant contributed to his downfall. Number 2. David Foley. While working as a confidential informant for the Rockford Police Department in Winnebago County, Illinois back in 2020, David Foley purchased cocaine from 25-year-old Preston Scott. Months later, he was found dead next to his car with several gunshot wounds. It wasn't long before investigators focused their sights on Scott, who was probably motivated to kill Foley thanks to the victim's status as an informant. After an investigation, Scott was charged in connection to 7 different murders, including Foley. He had an outstanding warrant in a drug case when authorities apprehended him for David's murder, and he was found guilty in late 2022. In light of the senseless tragedy, Rockford Police Chief Dan O'Shea reminded the public that the agency wasn't about to back down, but that it instead would step up its efforts to hold suspects responsible for selling illegal drugs and contraband. According to the most recent update, Scott was still awaiting sentencing. He faces up to 85 years in prison for the murder charge, as well as 14 years for being a felon in unlawful possession of a weapon. Number 1. John Dowry Jr. After he was arrested in 2004 on several gun and drug charges in East Baltimore, 38-year-old John Dowry Jr. faced over a decade behind bars. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence, he decided to become an informant in a federal murder case. The feds eventually lightened up on Dowry's restrictions. They excused him from jail time and let him go to rehab instead. He was also allowed to continue working. But Dowry's fresh start was interrupted when he came home from his factory job in 2005. He was waiting outside for his girlfriend to unlock the door of their apartment when 2 men approached him from behind and shot him. Dowry ran, but the gunmen continued firing and landed 6 shots on him. He eventually got inside his home and collapsed onto the floor. Miraculously, surgeons were able to save Dowry's life, but the near-death experience made him realize that people knew he was a snitch and that his life was in grave danger. So he left the area and maintained a low profile until Thanksgiving 2006, when he returned to East Baltimore to spend the holidays with his family. During the celebration, Dowry stopped at a convenience store. He was in there for just a few minutes before he was shot dead. After finally persuading witnesses to talk, authorities charged drug traffickers Melvin Gilbert and Darren Good with the man's murder. They were both sentenced to life without parole.
Would you rather hire a lawyer with no other clients thanks to them being newly licensed, or hire an experienced lawyer with multiple clients who may not be able to give your case their full attention? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.